Now, ANC Spokesperson Pule Mabe has denied the delay in revealing the outcome of the NEC meeting was due to tensions over the step-aside rule. Instead, he says the party will meet again this evening to ratify the decision taken over the weekend. Political analyst Professor Barry Hanyane joins me now for more on the story. Prof, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time then this evening. Firstly, your own analysis of the big question that's really on everybody's minds right now, which is what is going on inside the ANC?
Kathy, good evening to you, good evening to your viewers. It can be characterized basically as chaotic. And I think a lot of media houses are of that position. And we can safely now accept and appreciate the fact that ANC's center definitely is not holding. The House is in chaos, and of course, the issue of factionalism is central to such an analysis.
One of the things that we have seen, of course, are conflicting reports of what has actually been going on in those meetings, and just this idea that every faction right now is finding ways to get its point of view and to argue its own agenda, partly through the media.
Well, that said, it also shows that here is a party whose administrative structure and core systems and processes are pretty much in tatters. If it was a party whose structures, whose processes, including, by the way, issues of discipline, are at the core of running a party that, in my humble submission, by now we should be talking of a really modernized party, rather than a party that's still hanging on to rhetoric of revolution, rhetoric of struggle. Here's a party that is in government, and we are not seeing those qualities coming through and making sure that it is indeed a party of the majority. It is a party that stood the test of time. Instead, it's finding itself in sixes and sevens.
This criticism that is said to have been leveled by the former President Thabo Mbeki, in particular around the weaknesses of the Office of the Secretary General. Just the step-aside issue is one matter, and the issue of administration and what the Office of the SG represents, and if in fact, the incumbent is living up to those expectations, is a whole other conversation. Do you think that the party is going to be able to hold Ace Magashule accountable without being dragged down by some of the other issues that are at play and on the agenda?
Well, there will always be burning issues. I mean, the ruling or resolution of step aside, it's there because of the presence of serious allegations against certain key members. Now, one thing that we would all perhaps anticipate, at least, is that the office of this SG, which is perceived by most as the engine of the party, is not associated, least to say, tainted by serious allegations of corruption and misdoing of a kind. And instead, it's a party that is seen to be advancing the principles of honesty, of good governance, of rule of law, albeit on party lines. But certainly with the ANC, it's a different story altogether. That particular engine is unfortunately today associated with serious allegations at the time when it's election year, at the time when people out there are beginning to question whether indeed the fiber of leadership in the party is still there.
Of course, there are those who see the view that the step-aside rule should not just apply to the Secretary General of the organization, but should in fact include others who have been named, whether in integrity committee reports, that also need to account for matters, whether it's before the state or for their own behavior, really. Do you foresee a situation where the time frames over when the step-aside period should apply, do you see that overall resulting in there being very little movement on this matter, simply because of the number of officials it's likely to include?
Yeah. Kathy, I'm of the view that that time has come and gone, unfortunately. You can't have a resolution taken at the conference and then, of course, ratified later by the NEC. And 2 years down the line, almost if not a year, we're still sitting with a sense of inconsistency, a sense of lack of political will to make sure that people are held accountable, more so in a governing party. But maybe we should not let go of the fact that we were once warned that within the party itself there are skeletons, and perhaps the skeletons are in every cupboard that you find into the house. Perhaps that narrative holds water, and therefore if we were to wake up one day and hold everybody to account, we might not have the ANC. But again, that is a dangerous reality if it is there to observe, because then what this means is that the ANC has become free for all, and it is indeed in a descending mode where issues of morality will forever take the backseat at the expense of good governance and projecting a very good image to current followers as well as potential followers in the near future.
There's been a lot of talk ahead of this NEC meeting and even expectations over what is going to be decided. What happens if nothing ultimately is decided and if nothing ultimately changes?
Well, Kathy, nothing can be relative, I would warn. Instead, I'm of the opinion that as of this weekend, we have new fault lines. And it is those fault lines that we must begin to observe and re-examine very carefully. Are we now likely to see real, staunch supporters of both major factions, or are we likely to see a third major faction coming into play? And of course, the ultimate goal here is to gain traction, is to gain power, influence ANC politics in the near future. But here we're dealing with two bulls in the crop. The Ace Magashule's camp, so to speak, and the Cyril Ramaphosa's camp. Both sides have a way that says, look, we interpret resolutions differently, and in relation to the step aside, please don't touch our SG, because after all, rightly so, there are persons before him who have done wrong. And we didn't see any kind of disciplining or punitive measures, if needs be, taken against such individuals. So why now? So this inconsistency, unfortunately, will haunt both parties. And who knows, it might create room for more chaotic scenes to come.
Is it important for the president of the party, Cyril Ramaphosa, to be seen as having won the day on this debate? And if that doesn't happen, again, how does it influence the way things will play themselves out into the rest of this year? Because we have long been dealing with these rumors that he might not make it past the next conference of the ANC.
Well, it is. Remember, he is a president, both of the country and the party, especially that role of being the party president who wrote to all South Africans, but directing an open letter to all ANC members and followers to come back to the real world. And that real world was respect for morality, respect for the rule of law, and to basically label corruption as the #1 enemy of both party and country. Now, if he is serious about that agenda, let alone the agenda for unity and, of course, driving the party towards a party of choice, at least in the next 50 years, then surely he must be seen to be someone who is able to stand by his own words and make sure that all the principles that he stands for see the light of the day, and the ANC in particular is able to achieve all these goals reflective of a strong, robust leadership. Anything short of that will then mean that his presidency will have to be scrutinized, and no wonder why the calls for the NCG quickly, and of course for the next conference. All of these are aimed at creating a platform to really examine him than anything else, and perhaps leave aside the issue of the ANC as a brand, not to touch it. But it's difficult to separate the two, because after all, the ANC, the president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, is the face of the ANC. And anything that he does, good or bad, will come back to haunt the party itself.
Professor Barry Hanyani, let me thank you so much for your time tonight. He's an Associate Professor, Public Management and Governance, School of Government Studies at the Northwest University.